Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters. Don't forget to subscribe. I've got a goal of 1,400 subscribers. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed already to this channel. I can't run this channel without you. Today is Doctor Who Sunday, so it's time to chill from the woke and the crazy news and talk about Doctor Who. Well, I say relax, but today's story we're looking at is one of those that had a lot of contention surrounding it, which will, of course, naturally be discussed today as it does actually affect the story. Yes, we are talking about Time and the Rani as voted by you, the subscribers. To vote on the current poll, please head on over to the community page where you can find it. Time and the Rani is a Seventh Doctor story, which was written by Pip and Jane Baker with contributions from Sydney Newman. It was directed by Andrew Morgan and it aired to an average audience score of 4.63 million people. This also makes it the lowest viewed in audience score of the series. I think a lot of what I will say in this particular video today will probably highlight many of the reasons behind why that is the case. The Doctor's TARDIS gets shot out of the vortex and crash lands on Lancashire. He would regenerate from the Sixth Doctor into the Seventh Doctor, now played by Sylvester McCoy. When the Doctor wakes, he's discovered that he is being held captive to aid the Rani in her experiments with other legendary brainiacs. The Rani's plan is a wicked but clever one to be able to control time, destroy all human life and other planets, and give the dinosaurs a chance to return and to evolve. Can the Doctor stop her in time? I would have really loved to have been a fly on the wall in Pip and Jane Baker's writing room. I really would have with regards to this one. The concept for this story is absolutely fine, but there were so many extenuating circumstances and things happening on screen that make the execution of this particular story fall a bit lame, and it gets met with mixed reviews, I guess you could say, of positive, negative, and it's just okay. Now, I will discuss the extenuating circumstances later in the video, and that will touch briefly on events, of course, that led up to it as well. But I'm sure that many of you who watch these videos are aware of what they are already. However, I will at some point do a deep dive into the firing of Colin Baker in another video should you wish to see it. But for now, let's discuss Time and the Rani. This is one that I would never go out of my way to rewatch on multiple occasions. I sit in the middle with this story. There's great things about it, there's terrible things about it, and some of it is a bit meh. It's okay. It has its weaknesses and its strengths. Pip and Jane decided to bring back the Rani, a dominatrix time lady who is played by Kate O'Mara and has appeared once before in The Mark of the Rani, which was a Colin Baker story and arguably the better story. In that story, the antagonists, well, they were both actually the Rani and the Master, but in this story, it's just her. So we're left wondering what on earth Pip and Jane Baker would do with a time lady that wasn't interested in the Doctor, but only in her science. Well, the answer to that was keep her interested in her science and make her interested in the Doctor as well. Quite a simple one when you think about it. The Rani, thankfully, is not a character that gets overused. Mostly there's discrepancies surrounding the Pip and Jane Baker estate. They died without any children, and the actual rights to the Rani is lost within that estate, so I've heard. So that means it's very easy to have a clear vision of what the Rani is without modern day blurring. Back then, she was a character who had been seen once before, and therefore, aside from Mel, would be able to assist with the transition into the new Doctor. But this time, she was certainly more cold hearted and cruel. One of the things that Pip and Jane Baker wrote into the Rani and that I actually like was her ability to instantly know who the other Time Lords were. We all know that the Time Lords know when there's another Time Lord nearby or in their presence somewhere, but they don't always know who it is. The Rani does. They also wrote a lot of charisma into her, and Kate O'Mara, who was naturally charismatic herself, added a lot more to the role. She made her the charismatic, authoritative figure who was devious and extremely intelligent. Her intelligence was that to rival that of the Master. Kate's performance is so domineering that it could have run the risk of potentially upstaging Sylvester McCoy's performance as the Doctor. Casting Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor was actually a very unusual decision, in my opinion, because he's more of a character actor. He plays quite unusual roles and still to this day plays unusual roles, and not really that of a leading man. It does work having a character actor with the Doctor because the Doctor can actually be quite eccentric at times, which are actually types of roles that character actors do like to go for and be known for in this case. Now, this version of the Doctor with Sylvester is something that later thankfully changes. This version of the Doctor seen here in this story, while still is fundamentally the Doctor, was done on purpose. I don't think the jovial, jokey Doctor was Sylvester's idea. His audition tape footage shows that. And his audition tape is much darker. And also, can I just say that must have been really strange for Janet Fielding from going from being in the show to being the casting director for the Doctor. Anyway, like I was saying, I think to make a Jolly Doctor would have probably come from the higher ups. The show at that point was on the rocks. The show had been put on hiatus during the Colin Baker era and then put on trial for a series. Colin's Doctor was quite often considered over the years to be the worst Doctor in Doctor Who history. He started out a lot more like the earlier Doctor and mellowed out in trial. However, I don't think it was the public opinion overall that got him fired. I think the show was not liked by the higher ups, and it's easier to blame the face of the show than it is to investigate what's going on behind the scenes that's causing it to go completely wrong. Now, I am a wretched millennial, so I don't actually know really, truly, and honestly what the public was actually saying about Colin's Doctor at that time, nor what they were truly saying about the actual stories that were being produced for him. But it is safe to say he was unceremoniously fired on principle, and quite rightly, he didn't come back for the regeneration sequence, and he was replaced with a jokey, jovial Doctor that was a portrayal that was complete opposite to his, which unfortunately doesn't work. Now, Sylvester's intentions with the Doctor are very much within his audition tape, and probably he took it further once they made the changes. They noticed that Jolly Jovial Doctor was not working, so they went ahead and they actually did it, and he got to sit down in meetings and actually discuss it. Colin never got the chance to do that, from what I understand. So they went in more of the direction that Sylvester originally wanted to go in, and it paid off. But for the start of this series and the new Doctor, in the hopes of saving the show, they went for humour. Now, fundamentally, the Doctor was actually still the Doctor. His smarts was still there. I didn't mind him playing the spoons at all, but there were far too many puns on expressions throughout it all. For example, two wrongs don't make a left, and waste net want net, which is quite a mouthful to say, actually. The odd one here and there is fine, but it just jars the plot if it's continuous. I also think it plays into the character actor aspect of Sylvester himself. Farsight also agrees with what I have just said. The only thing I really liked about it were those energy traps the Rani designed. I thought they were a good special effect. I wasn't impressed by the regeneration, the reason for it, or the new Doctor at that point. Too much mangling of quotes as opposed to his predecessor and comedy. It was also a pretty uninspiring story. I did love the new titles on the CGI opening sequence, one of the very first on TV. I believe Doctor Who was showing it could compete with bigger budget productions, showing they could. Now, one thing that Farsight mentions is the energy traps. I just so happen to agree. All of the effects in this story were a lot better. They definitely had them updated for sure, 100%. Doctor Who never has had a massive budget. They certainly spent it on the special effects for this story. Those traps are good, but my favourite thing, effects wise, was the brain. Having a brain that big and the fact that you could actually hear its thoughts and the fact that the brain goes into psychosis when the doctor controls it, that was brilliant idea. The only thing effects wise I didn't like in this particular story was the weapons that the tech traps were firing. It kept on shooting shiny foil, and there was always a delay between actor being hit with this foil and the trap, and then them falling to the floor underneath the trap. However, the tech traps are pretty cool, and how they stunned Mel was pretty awesome. Now, Mel. For some people, she is great, and for some people, she is irritating. I think for my dad, she was both. I was doing the rewatch for this at my parents' house this time, and as she was screaming, he walked into the room and without looking at the screen, he said, "Oh, that's Bonnie Langford." Now, that takes a lot for my dad to say something like that. They got her to scream and scream and scream. So much so that she's losing her voice in the story. The screaming is annoying after a while, but I think that's because it's high pitched because her voice is naturally high. Even Mark had this to say, not a fan of the story. The only good thing I can remember about it is the cliffhanger to episode 1 and the hope that they would get rid of Mel. Oh, the new Doctor Who theme for the Seventh Doctor is one of my faves. Credit where credit is due to Kate O'Mara in this case for being able to mimic her voice like that. Although she doesn't actually do it for long, it served its purpose. It's kind of a reverse master move, but she disguises herself as Mel after giving the doctor amnesia, so he will repair the thermodynamics. I would say that Kate switching between the high and the low voice is not an easy thing to do, and she would definitely have had to look after her voice in order to be able to achieve it. Actors should be doing that anyway. Thankfully, though, for her, she didn't actually have to try and mimic the Bonnie Langford scream, and she has quite a lower, husky voice anyway, so that would have been exceptionally difficult for her to do. Although I'm probably sure she could have done it if she had tried. They were not very good at utilizing Mel's computer skills, which is a thing throughout her tenure on the show, and it was something that I actually wish they would have nurtured. It is something that they actually tried to rectify in New Who with the legend of Ruby Sunday. So full credit to them there, even though it wasn't that great of a story, although it was probably one of the better ones in that series. How would Mel be able to remove a leg band with her computer knowledge? I'm just throwing that out there for you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. They do truly show off the Rani's knowledge in this. We do see it in the Mark of the Rani, but it's more pronounced in this one because we don't have the master there. Her wanting the doctor to be dead is not actually a trait I would expect from the Rani. However, her removing the geniuses from time is something I would 100 expect from her. And I do actually like the idea behind that a lot. The reason behind it is pretty cool, although we spend a lot of time dilly dallying around with Comedy Doctor than anything else. That does mean that the fourth part of this story is all action and all information, which is a bit of a downer because it is actually a lot to process and it has a ridiculous, irresponsible, and uncharacteristic moment of the Doctor just winging it and crossing his fingers behind his back. I call New Who out for this, so I'm calling this out. We need to see him be confident, and in this case, it was really just very weird. The Rani has one of those types of enemy monologues that sound really cool, but you can't actually grasp everything in it. It takes a couple of watches to actually fully understand it. It's just some of this really should have been revealed much earlier rather than in one go. We don't actually need that much information other than the fact that the Rani is on the planet Lakersha and is in need of an expert in thermodynamics, which of course is the Doctor. That's all fine pacing wise. In part 2, we learn the Doctor and the Rani are the same age, 953 years old to be precise. I was also fine with how the Doctor discovers that Mel is not the Rani with the taking of each other's pulses. The pacing is slightly off, but it's okay and I can live with that. Now, in part 3, it's actually where it gets a bit funny and dodgy pacing wise. with the information, which actually is what I think resulted in the pileup of information in part 4. All we learn is that the Rani needed the summer solstice. I don't know exactly what could have been revealed in this part, and that's because it's all interconnected. Maybe the bit about where she mentions the bit about bringing the dinosaurs back by eradicating life and the doctor having to try to figure out how she was going to do it. Maybe even the doctor could have actually done the speech at the end or towards the end instead of the Rani. Her wanting to explode strange matter into helium 2. After the explosion, the atmosphere will form a shell of chronons, which are discrete particles of time. The gamma rays will cause the primate cortex of the brain to go into a chain reaction, and they will multiply until the gap between the planet and the shell is filled. She wants to change LaCursha into a time manipulator by making it a cerebral mass to control time anywhere in the cosmos, or to go and bring the dinosaurs back. Now, I actually didn't read that word for word, but like I said, it is actually pretty cool. How many times can you actually say that in one video? What wasn't so cool though is the opening. And usually we go right into the Doctor Who opening title sequence for Classic Who. However, in this case, we didn't actually get that. We actually had a little pre-scene, little introduction to tie up some loose ends and address the elephant in the room. Now, this particular trope would actually become more common with New Who, and that's absolutely fine, but it was rarely seen in Classic Who. But like I say, there was an elephant in the room that they really needed to address. Colin Baker was fired by the powers at be with a phone call from Jonathan Nathan Turner. Colin wanted to come back for a third series and regenerate at the end of that series. However, it had been considered that the hiatus year by the higher ups had been one of his contracted years, so therefore, technically, he had had his 3 years as the Doctor. So the answer was no. He was the fall guy for everything bad about the show. So he was fired, but would he please come back to do the regeneration at the beginning of the first episode? Firstly, that's extremely rude, and naturally and understandably, Colin said no. So it was left to Sylvester flailing around in a wig and Colin's costume. Pip and Jane Baker were left with no option but to write a lame duck as a regeneration opener that wouldn't give too much away that it wasn't Colin. My question is, though, how many of you actually remember this and knew that it wasn't actually Colin, but instead it was actually Sylvester McCoy? I think that's why they also didn't actually reveal the Rani later on in the episode. At least she could save it a little bit. And also, we also knew she was going to be in it, so what was the point in waiting? Even though the opening was really flat and disrespectful on the point of the head honchos of the BBC, I did like the new title sequence for Sylvester, and it does have some good costumes, sets, and special effects. Time and the Rani really had the chance to be quite a dark episode, and I think Coclud put it quite well. As others have mentioned, Series 24 changed from the more recent darker seasons to a more silly feel. If it had the darker vibe, it would have probably been an 8 out of 10. The silly brought it down to a 6. And I actually would give it a 6 as well. Well, that's what I think. Let me know what you think. Chat about it, don't shout about it. I'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.